You know, the beginning of this century could be marked by the reverse process, where Americans flee, looking for opportunities in other countries. Because we're the country of high taxes, of big government, of big regulations, of massive inflation. I mean, who's going to want to live through that? You know, I hear a lot of people talking about, you know, we can't have these big deficits because we're putting the bills to our children and our grandchildren, meaning you guys. Well, you don't have to pay the bills because you can leave. There's no one keeping you here. And that's what's going to happen. The best and the brightest and the most ambitious are going to say, I'm out of here. And they're going to go. Especially people who are second or third generation, maybe they're Asian Americans, and they still have family. Why not go back? You know, why stay here? So we need to do something quickly to turn this situation around before it's just, you know, everybody abandon the sinking ship. Because the ship is sinking. And if we don't plug up the holes, you know, abandoning ship is about all that we have left. So anyway, if you want to do something to help me beyond voting, you know, go to the Milford. We might have somebody from the campaign here that has some flyers, but you can find the address at my website, which is schiffforsenate.com. We should have some kind of group here at Yale, you know, trying to get Yale students to support me. You know, one of my issues, and I'll talk about the economic crisis, but one of the issues that I talk about a lot, particularly with students, is one of, you know, college tuition. And, you know, a lot of my opponents try to say that, oh, Peter's the education candidate because he's against government-guaranteed student loans. Yeah, I am against government-guaranteed student loans because I'm for the students. I'm against the universities overcharging the students, and the only reason that they can do that is because the government guarantees the loans. If the government didn't guarantee student loans, students couldn't borrow all the money because nobody would lend it, because it's obvious that a lot of the students just wouldn't pay it back. So interest rates would skyrocket on student loans, and students wouldn't take them out. But what would happen? Would the universities just be empty? Would they just have empty classrooms? No. They would slash prices. That's all they could do. They'd have to put butts in the seats. You know, you have a professor giving a lecture. It doesn't cost any more money, really, to have 100 kids or one kid in that classroom or 1,000 kids. I mean, they don't even grade it. You know, they have Scantron machines. It doesn't matter how many kids are there. So they're going to slash prices. They're going to slash them to the point where students don't need to borrow any money to go, and that's how it should be. And in fact, you know, when people talk and they look at this escalating price of college tuition, and it's just amazing that that's the case. Why isn't a college tuition? Why isn't the price going down, like the price of, you know, the laptop computers that all the students have, or the cell phones that all the students have? Why does everything that the students buy get cheaper except the college tuition? Well, that's because the free market is working in the computer business, but it's not working in the education business. The government is preventing market forces from bringing down tuitions. I mean, if you think about it logically, it should be very inexpensive to educate people. With all the technology that we have that make record keeping so much more efficient, and grading, and the way we can disseminate information from the teachers to the students, the way we can gather that information, it's so much more efficient than it was when they had filing cabinets and they had index cards and maybe carbon paper. I mean, you know, think about how much cheaper it should be. Plus, look at the economies of scale. Look how many more people we're educating today. The cost per pupil should be going down because of economies of scale. If we're graduating so many more kids from college than we graduated 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the cost per kid should be coming down. It makes no sense. The only reason that education is so expensive is because the government got involved in it. And why did the government get involved in it? To get the votes of the students. So the government has a vested interest in getting tuitions expensive in the first place, so they can get the votes of the students by promising them aid so they can afford to go. When if the government never got involved in the first place, they wouldn't need the aid. And that's the secret of government. I remember Harry Brown, who passed away a few years ago when he ran for president. He had a great line. He said, the government is an expert at breaking your leg and then handing you a crutch and saying, see, without me you couldn't walk. But anyway, so let me talk about where we are in this whole financial crisis. Because a lot of people that didn't see it coming, who specifically said it was impossible to happen, they think it's all over. They think the government has done the right thing, that they've applied the right medicine for the disease, and that now the economy is going to emerge healthy again. And they've completely misdiagnosed the problem, and what they believe to be the cure is actually worsening the underlying disease, and so we have set ourselves up for a far bigger catastrophe than the one we experienced starting in 2008. The problem that we had was not the result of some type of market failure. And it was not something that nobody could have predicted. In fact, it was very easily predictable. I'm surprised that so few people were able to see what was really so obvious. I mean, people think that, well, am I clairvoyant? Why was I so smart? I wasn't that smart. I mean, they were just that dumb. And the reason that I knew what was going to happen is because I understood what the effects would be of government policy. I knew that the policy that was inflating the real estate bubble was distorting the economy. I mean, interest rates were much too low. Alan Greenspan brought interest rates down to 1%. I mean, would the free market have put interest rates at 1%? No, that would have been impossible. Because interest rates are supposed to reflect a balance between savings and borrowing. Well, we hardly had any savings, and we had a lot of borrowing, so interest rates should have been very high. The government artificially suppressed them. And the result of that was that a lot of things were done that should not have been done because the market was fooled. Investments were made that really weren't supported by the level of savings that existed in our society. Wall Street took all this cheap money and gambled with it because the cost of gambling was so low. Americans took all the cheap money and spent it. And nobody saved, because why would you save and earn 1%? Especially when real estate and stock prices were going straight up, you were a fool if you saved your money. Just speculate with everybody else. So the government inflated this bubble, and in the process, they took all the resources in our economy and screwed them all up so that they weren't where they were supposed to be. We had people working in areas where they shouldn't have been working. We had capital in areas where it shouldn't have been. Meanwhile, other areas that needed capital weren't getting it, or they needed workers. And so we have all these imbalances that are building up. And eventually it's going to collapse. Just like I knew in the 1990s that the internet bubble would collapse. And I warned investors at the time to get out of those stocks, that there would be a bursting and there would be a recession. What I didn't appreciate in 2001 or 2002, at the time, I didn't appreciate the depths to which the government would go to prevent that recession from running its natural course, which is exactly what the government should have done. Now, in the political game, people like to, accuse me of, Peter Schiff just wants to let everybody fail, let everybody lose their jobs. He wants the government to do nothing. He likes the recession. He enjoys it. It's not that I like it. I don't want the recession. I didn't want the bust, but I didn't want the boom. But, we can't change that. If you have the boom, you have to have the bust, because the bust is where the market corrects for all those mistakes. That's when all the malinvestments are liquidated. That's when we fix the problems that we created. We need to do that, right? Why would we want to interfere with that process of rebalancing the economy? Even if it's somewhat painful, right? It's analogous to a drug addict. If you're high on drugs and you want to kick the habit, you got to go through withdrawal. The withdrawal process is not as pleasant as being high, but that's where your body is getting back to a normal, healthy state. You don't want to resist that, but that's what the government does. The government wants to pretend that it can do something. It has some magic elixir that can make the pain go away. That's what they did with respect to the bursting of the Nasdaq bubble. I did not believe that the government would be so irresponsible. I had expected a much sharper recession following that bursting of that bubble. Unfortunately, the recession was cut short. And during that recession, it was the only recession we've ever had where consumers had more debt at the end of the recession than the beginning. It was the only recession where housing prices actually rose, because it wasn't a real recession. The government prevented the real recession. We did fix some of the mistakes. A lot of the internet companies did go bankrupt, and some of that capital was removed. But instead of that capital going where it should have went, it went into housing. And we just simply inflated a bigger bubble, with even more distortions to the economy than the previous bubble. And so I knew as early